The Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Today on the podcast, resident artist, director, and choreographer Jeffrey L. Page talks about the Philadelphia Theatre Company production of Choir Boy by Tarell Alvin McCraney. Here is my interview with Jeffrey L. Page. Welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Darnell Radford, and today I am in the virtual studio with Philadelphia Theatre Company's resident artist, Jeffrey L. Page. Jeffrey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Darnell. I'm so happy to be here.
Jeffrey is the director of Choir Boy, which is written by Academy Award-winning writer of Moonlight, Tarell Alvin McCraney, and it is on stage now if you are listening to this. But before we dive into Choir Boy, we're going to learn a little bit about Jeffrey. So Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, that's a big question. Let's see. I am a director and a choreographer of both opera, contemporary theater, as well as classical theater. I've worked from Hollywood to New York. After Choir Boy, I get to working on A Misbehavin', which is another wonderful piece I'm excited about, and also 1776, which is going to Broadway. And I'm super happy to be back in Philadelphia, back in the city that saw me become, that saw me go from a boy to a man. The city that taught me so many things about life and paying bills and artistic prowess and growth and all of that stuff. So I'm really thrilled to be back in Philly creating work.
Well, that's great. And so before you came back here, where were you?
So I currently live in New York City.
Okay.
And so I commute back and forth. For this project, I've been kind of stationed here in Philly for the last month or so, of course, creating this project because we've been having rehearsals daily, and it's been a long process, a long, exhilarating and fun process.
Yes.
So I actually go back to New York tomorrow to get working on some other stuff. So how did your path lead you to PTC as resident artist? Let's see. I went to grad school at Columbia, and Paige Price, she came to Columbia as a guest in one of my classes, and I was kind of the loud spoken student who was asking all sorts of, questions, provocative questions, obnoxious questions, what have you. And after that session, Paige reached out to me and we started a deeper conversation in terms of, what are my hopes as an artist? How has my past career led me to something in the future, and finally she wanted me to somehow join the fray of Philadelphia Theatre Company, and so that's how I kind of came here. Is Paige Price? She really wanted an artist who she was able to have creative discussions with about programming and structure at Philadelphia Theatre Company. So that's how I ended up at Philadelphia Theatre Company as resident artist.
Great, great. And so we are we're here in February, and we're raring to go. Hopefully, our listeners already have tickets for Choir Boy. But tell us a little bit about this production, Choir Boy.
Oh, another big question. Choir Boy, uh, Choir Boy is is a it follows the life of this boy named Ferris, who goes to a boarding school, an all boys boarding school. Um, and Ferris is a very self-proclaimed, audacious, bold, uh, absolutely out of the box, smart, intelligent young man. Um, and so it kind of takes us through all of the trials and tribulations that he has gone through, being such a queer, and I use that word purposefully, being such a queer young man. So it takes us through all of the heartaches and all of the trials and tribulations. So we get to really get inside of what's happening in his mind. But not only that, we were able to see Ferris as kind of a metaphor, for that opens us up to all of the other stories of these other boys, inside of this particular school, as well as, in my particular production, as well as the teacher, Mr. Pendleton, and also the headmaster. We start to really get a good gumbo stew of all of these characters, and how they reckon, with certain truths about the world and each other.
And what were your first impressions of the piece the first time you read it?
Well, so I
Or
saw
did
it
you
on
experience?
Broadway.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Or did you experience it first and then read it?
Yeah, I saw it on Broadway, and I was struck by it. I was struck by it, but I guess it didn't stick in my mind too much. Um, and then a little later, after I seen it on Broadway, I bought the book and I read it. And I remember I had this memory of me being in Los Angeles, in a park on a bright sunny day in a park, and me reading this script and absolutely bawling my eyes out in the middle of this bright sunshiny day in Los Angeles. And just saying to myself, wow, I don't know if I fully understood everything, everything that I read in this book. I don't know if I fully was able to capture all of the stuff that I saw, that I read in this book on Broadway. And so it made me very interested in a deeper way. And then, as life would have it, Paige Price came to me and asked me if I would direct, Choir Boy. So now I'm at the space where I have to kind of put my money where my mouth is, because because now I have thoughts about it, and now the question is how do I bring those thoughts to manifestation, within the body of a full production.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to your feelings when you read it. That's pretty much me when I'm coming back from the drama bookshop on the train ride home. I could read a whole piece before I get to Trenton most of the time, and I'm sitting there like, wow, wow. Just kind of blown away. Sometimes that visual experience, because everything's moving so quickly and you don't have the context when you're sitting there just kind of taking it all in. that you do need a second glance at it. You know, think in the same way in musicals where if you listen to the soundtrack before you get to see it live, you have one thought about it, and then those thoughts are deepened when you get to experience it as well.
Right. That's exactly what was going through my mind. And what I wanted to do is try to remember the feelings that I had when I was sitting in that park reading the book, and really start to unpack all of those feelings. And how can I make that apparent to an audience that's watching this show? There's this saying that theater should come to you at the speed of life, right? And so what that means is as you're watching it, you're also processing, but then you're watching it. So how could it happen upon you where you can both process and take in all of that information all at the same time? And so that's what I've attempted to do with this production, is really take the audience on a psychological journey of all of these characters in this play. Of course, through the spearheading of Pharus. So yeah, that's exactly what it was for me. It was like, how can I make these feelings happen? And of course, because I'm also a choreographer, I have particular ideas about the body being an information carrying vessel, like without words, like the body without words, inside of its physical actions, is a vessel that is full and complete of story. And so how can I use the body to kind of layer another story on top of the text that the text hints at? So how can I use the body in terms of choreography, in terms of staging, and so on and so forth? So that's exactly what it is. And I think it kind of opens up the realm of possibilities of what theater is able to do. It's not just going to an art museum and looking at a painting. What it is it's going to an exhibition that all of these different artists have been assigned this particular role of creating this work together. A lighting designer, a set designer, costume designer, the actors, the music composer, the arranger. All of these people have come together to figure out what kind of art that they're making all together. So it's a really fully bodied experience, to go to the theater and to experience this space and time that can't be repeated ever. Yes, there are multiple shows, but it can't. But that moment, the way that light happened, the moment, the way that the actor said that line, that can never be repeated again. It can be executed again, but the approach is going to be extremely different depending on so many variables. And so that's what makes theater so powerful and so intriguing and thrilling, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about timing, it's about flow, it's about atmosphere. Everything you bring in as you enter, you get onto the stage, makes all of this so unique and exciting every time. I feel like there should be I feel like two things should happen in theaters. I feel like there should be a half price ticket so you can come back and see it again, because there's always like something you missed or something you definitely grabbed onto, and you took it home with you, maybe brought it into other conversations. But there's also so much more that you can process, at a later time, if you go. And I also think that the script, if it is available, you should be able to get a hold of the script after you experience something. It's always been a thing of mine, just because it's like, what, wait, I picked up on a handful of things here that I've processed, but I want to get into this. I want to read it and
But
see, how that feels.
but you know, the thing about it is the script is not. And I'm pretty adamant about this. The script is not the work itself in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
What I always tell the actors is that you have four different scripts, and I'm putting this in quotation marks. You have four different scripts that are happening simultaneously inside of entertainment, inside of any kind of performative structure. You have the text, which are the words that the actors speak, or the dances that the dancers dance, or the notes that the musicians play. So you have the text, and then in addition to the text, you have the physical action, which has a completely different story within itself. And then you have the mise en scène, which is the situation of how the object is placed against and with other subjects, right? That tells a story. A woman sitting at a desk with her glasses on and tons of books at the desk alone, that tells a story, right? And then in addition to that, you have tempo, pace, and rhythm. So these are four different structures that happen inside of theater that a script can hint to, but the script is only a part of the equation. So I do agree with you that I think that we should have access to those scripts, but I think it's important to know that theater is the work that the script is attempting to reach.
That's a very good point, and I'm going to take that into every theater from now on. Those 4 points, and I was taking notes as you were talking there. I'm like, ooh, let me get that. All right, so take us into the room and tell us how you approached this piece and how you began to interact with the cast.
So as I would approach any piece, I believe that, a long time ago, when the Greeks were thinking about theater, and of course they got it from the Egyptians, but when the Greeks were thinking about theater and how to process theater, what they were actually doing is they were trying to figure out ways to process pain and process tragedy. And so they created structures in order to figure out how we can process these tragedies. And they called it Greek tragedy. So it was a study, is what I'm getting at. And so the way that I go about my process is I like to take actors like on as like a study group. Let's study the scripts. Let's unpack this script. Let's figure out what this script is attempting to say to us. What is this script doing that is supposed to shift us, and in what way is this script supposed to be shifting us? So it starts to deepen the process of what it means to look at a script, and then how do we embody what that script is? Miles Davis said, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't seem to find the exact quote, but he said it in several different kinds of ways. He said, an interviewer asked him, how does he go about playing the music that he plays? And he said, I don't play notes. I play in between the notes. I bend the notes, and my play happens in the blank spaces that are in between the notes. And so I think that's a powerful way to say that the words are are only signposts. And so how do we create structures that transcend the words, you know? And so I think that's really, really powerful. So I look to people like Miles Davis when I think about theatrical structures, and I look to the Greeks, and I look to try to understand how theater can be utilized as a philosophical tool and a tool for protest. Because I think that theater is a very powerful philosophical tool and a tool for protest. So that's how I go about it, and that's how I believe that theater should resonate inside of artists' minds as well as society's mind.
Wow, that's amazing. You said earlier on, that the character Pharus is a metaphor for the other boys and their stories. Can you build on that?
Mm-hmm. So I believe that word queer, the etymology, I look up the etymology of words because definitions change with how the zeitgeist is shifting. You know, a definition of a word is really just an amalgamation of its etymology. So I look up etymology of words, and so that the etymology of queer, it leads to this idea of strange, othered, unorthodox. Atypical, those kinds of ideas. And I believe that all of us have a strangeness about us. We all have certain strangenesses about us that perhaps we don't like to make public. Perhaps we like to keep it, our strangenesses we like to keep inside of our minds and kind of hidden, because there's something about that we may fear. Sometimes we may be ashamed of our strangeness. Sometimes we might be scared of our strangenesses. Sometimes we don't fully understand the bigness of our strangeness. And I think Pharus, inside of his queerness and his audacity and his boldness, he lays his strangeness right in front of for everyone to see. And he's absolutely he's fearful of things, but the show is speaking about how a person that looks like they have no fear is actually dealing with a lot of different traumas.
Yeah.
And so by the end of the show, we have learned something about strangeness, and we have learned something about fear and self-fear and projected fear that speaks to us. I think it speaks to all of us. So I think all of the characters in this show, they have a strangeness about them. And so the question, and so I think Pharus, I think we're looking directly at Pharus because he's the one who he's the sacrificial lamb, right? He's the one that's saying, I'm going to bear the brunt of me putting all of my strangenesses in the open for everyone to see. I think all of the characters, they have a relationship to his strangeness. And it calls out their own strangeness in various kinds of ways. And so that's why I think that Pharus is like an amalgamation of all of these characters, or he kind of acts like a metaphor for all of these characters in the show. And really, I feel like he is a metaphor for all of us, the entire, watching audience, to see him reckon with his strangeness. It enlivens something in us in how we might begin to reckon with our own strangeness.
Hmm. Do you think? Do you think Ferris is embracing his queerness and expressing it so boldly as a calling, as his purpose? Is he doing this for them, or for, something inside of him that he needs?
I think that's a good question.
Because when I thought
I think
about it,
I think that. Go ahead.
sorry. When I thought about it, I was thinking, like, you know, Ferris is clearly a fish out of water, or at least comes off that way, because there isn't another character that, it's even enclosed to the embodiment of Ferris. So, but Ferris is well aware of that, yet still, pushes forward so boldly. And it just, I guess when you think about, if you identify as queer, coming of age, and in a space where you haven't quite found your people, your tribe, your safe space, that you might reserve all of who you are, until you feel a bit safer. Or you walk in saying, "This is me," and and it is what it is.
You know, I have you ever heard this this story of it's a folktale, and it's about the eagle who was born to chickens. Like, so essentially, the folktale goes, and I can't remember it verbatim, but it goes something like this: the eggs were mixed up in some way, and so now this eagle's egg, found itself in a chicken's nest, and and it hatched, and so much of this eagle's life, this eagle believed itself to be a chicken, right? And it suppressed all of those things inside of it that made it an eagle. It suppressed it. So it's kind of like a beach ball, right, that you push underwater. Eventually, it's going to pop up with ferocity, with great ferocity. The more that you push that beach ball underwater, the more fervently it's going to pop up, right? And so this eagle is pushing down every urge that it has to be an eagle, because it was taught to be a chicken. It's pushing back every urge to be an eagle. And then I forgot how it ends. Maybe, somehow it falls off the branch or something and discovers that it can actually fly, and it has all of these big, gorgeous wings, and so on and so forth. So when you ask me that question, is Pharus looking to prove something to himself or to someone else inside of his out loudness? Right? I think he's just attempting to be. He's just attempting to be. In all of his swish, in all of his sway, in all of the way he walks and the way he talks. It's interesting. One of the characters says to Pharus, he says something like, "You so gay," or something like that. And Pharus says, "How you know I'm gay? Have you ever seen me be gay?" Right? And Pharus says, "Gay means to be with another man, right?" have you ever seen me be with another man? So how I'm gay? Like, what about the way I am makes me gay? Right? And so it's a great point, because Pharus is simply being. We have assigned all of these attributes and thoughts, and we have projected our hopes and fears and delusions on Pharus. We have done that. Pharus didn't do that. Pharus is simply being. He's simply being and being himself. But because he's being himself, we associate it with him being outlandish. We associate it with him being too big. We associate it with him being performative. When actuality, he is simply being. And in actuality, his being is a mirror back on us and our fears on how we are not allowed to be, how we have suppressed our own bits and pieces of strangenesses that hide deep inside of our bodies.
Yeah. It's like the code. It's like the code they follow. It's it's kind of made up amongst the students, but they're following that as gospel, as law, in a way, and it's kind of judging everything they do and everything they say and how they respond to the world, and in particular how Pharus is just being.
And yes, it's definitely like the code they follow. But the interesting thing about that is someone taught them that code, and like they somehow figured out that code in some way, right? They didn't like arrive and say like this is the code, right? Some in some way they taught them that code, and so we have to ask ourselves, what is the headmaster's function?
Yeah.
And we have to ask ourselves, what is his function with all of these interludes of sorts? Like, what's his function? He's constantly reminding the students to be honorable Drew men, right? He's constantly reminding these students that, right? So, of course, he's not saying the code, but in some way, shape, or form, perhaps he's nurturing that idea. And I think once again, it teaches us about the not so obvious but obvious ways that we nurture and subscribe to behaviors that are unsavory.
Yeah. It seemed to me that that the headmaster had sides of himself. Usually when in a story where we hear about the headmaster is all about the image of the school they lead, and it's ultimately because they want to ensure that they continue to receive the funds that they receive to operate the school. But I can't help but wonder what his true motivations were for placing Pharus as, in the position that he places him in, knowing that this sort of mindset was in the air at the prep school.
Right, exactly. It just makes you. All of it just makes you wonder, which again is the reason that I say that all of these characters and the headmaster is not excluded from that. All of these characters have a very, very interesting story that we could learn from. All of these characters, including Mr. Pendleton, and him, him policing the way Black people use the N word. Like, you know, whether you are for the use of the N word or not for the use of the N word, I think that's potentially problematic. You know, to police black bodies and what they say and how they say it. So I think that there's something interesting about that. So all of these characters, I think they have something to do with how we are seeing this world.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting. Pendleton's response there was not to unpack that further, even though that was his overall mission in the class, to sort of
right. It's also like this thing, like, so essentially what Bobby says is that my mother is dead. Like, he says that, right? He says my mother is dead, expletive, right? What Pendleton heard was expletive.
Mm-hmm.
He heard nothing else.
Mm.
And what Pendleton chose to reprimand Bobby on was the expletive. He didn't attempt to create any system of healing for the fact that obviously, or perhaps Bobby is acting out because his mother is dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, that is not even within the realm of possibilities here. And so I think that's something to pay attention to. I think that's interesting. I think all of these stories are really interesting stories. I think Tarell has laid out a structure that's super interesting to speak about and to really dive deeply into and to talk about in very deep ways.
Yeah. Do you think gatekeepers know that they're gatekeepers?
I don't know. I wish I was quick-witted enough to be able to come up with like a really sassy response to that question, but I don't know. I think sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how both the headmaster and Mr. Pendleton are in a way carrying leashes, where they're sort of giving them space but not so much, really trying to push them into areas of growth at some points, but then sort of pulling them back when they realize they don't have control of them.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree. I think it's interesting that Mr. Pendleton is coming to the school to teach a class on thinking. Mm-hmm. But is he really allowing the young people to think on their own terms?
Yeah.
No, and maybe he is, and I'm not judging it at all. I'm just saying it's something to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's something to pay attention to, and that's the beauty of what theater is you're going to see something very different from how I might see it. A good example is I went to go see Slave Play a few years ago, and I saw it off Broadway. There was no real reason for me to see it other than the fact that I just wanted to support Black theater. Mm-hmm. And so I went to go see it on Broadway, and I sat next to a group of white women. And I just happened to sit and, I'm just kind of looking, not expecting to be shifted or changed in any way by it because I've already seen it. And I noticed that the lady beside me, she kind of dabbed at her eye, like as she was, like she was crying. And I kind of saw it out of the corner of my eye. And then I looked deeper at what was happening on stage. And because of that, it helped me to learn something new about the play, but it also helped me to learn something about this woman who was looking at something and being emotionally impacted by something that I otherwise probably would not have noticed. And isn't that the power of theater? Isn't that the power of diverse perspectives and a space where a group of people can come together and be in a room together and laugh and cry together, all together, and develop different emotions around what this piece is together. There's a study that says, and I can't remember where this study is from, but it says that at some point in time, the audience, the entire audience, has a similar heartbeat because they're experiencing, they're all experiencing this thing together. And that's called fellow feeling. Like, you're feeling similar things, or you're feeling empathetically to the fellows who sit across from you. So the theater is able to ignite this idea of fellow feeling, which is exactly what makes theater and live theater so important, so dangerously important.
Yeah. Like when the audience gasps at the same time, at the same moment.
Right.
I've been fortunate enough to return to many theaters, this season, and I can think of a night last week where, a key moment in the piece revealed itself, and it felt like the collective audience was, just
right.
we all realized what happened at the same time in the same moment. And yes, you can't get that from a screen. You can't tell that you connected on a moment with other people, through a screen.
Right. And the other thing is live performance in theater is the only kind of event where nothing is guaranteed, and everything is dependent on the moment, right? So if you or I are in the theater, and if I don't know, we clap at a particular point in time, or we cough at a particular point in time, or we sneeze, or we move around in our chairs at a particular point in time. The interesting thing about that is that could impact the entire show and make the show very, very different. Not worse, not better, but but in a small or in a large way, it could impact the show. So theater is this event that happens that is thrilling because it's dangerously in the moment. What if an actor who's a real live human being on that stage? What if an actor says something that's not in the scripts? What if something it's a real live situation, and live people, humans are operating the theater, which means that we are deeply connected to a human experience, which is so spectacular in my opinion.
Yeah. Is there a character in this production that resonates with you more or less?
Depending on how I'm feeling, they all resonate with me depending on how I'm feeling. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one day it might be Ferris, the next day it might be David, the next day it might be AJ and his compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And is AJ hiding something? The next day it might be Junior. And, does he have ADHD that we have not completely considered, as something that we should be dealing with in the Black community? My compassion for Bobby is so magnificent because here's this young boy who's acting out in such a way, and you have to ask yourself, why is he acting out in this kind of way? I have compassion for each of these characters depending on how I'm feeling, to be very honest with you.
Mm. Yeah, I think I read something that was saying that they wondered whether AJ was sort of Terrell's kind of you know pick for the world we should live in. The way AJ responds to Ferris, the way AJ is with Ferris, is this kind of an idea of you know what in a more ideal kind of world.
Mm. I agree. I think that's spectacular. I'm reluctant to talk too much about
Yes.
AJ because I certainly don't want to give away the story
Yeah.
to some of your listeners. I want them to come and experience it.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm a little reluctant to talk about AJ, and I hope
No,
you
I
can
get
forgive
it.
me
And
for that.
every time I've either read the piece or experienced the piece ahead, I do find myself just talking around moments, and it makes for an interesting conversation and an interesting exercise in withholding.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I have needed to go about that exercise many a times through this process. So yeah.
So, as we wrap up, I'll say, what makes Choir Boy a production that needs to be experienced at PTC right now?
I'll say again, we all have queernesses and strangenesses that want to be attended to. And sometimes those strangenesses impact the world in really dangerous ways. And I feel right now that the world is a dangerously tumultuous place because right this moment, because we have not dealt with our own strangenesses.
Hmm.
And I think it's necessary that we reckon with that. And what better way to start to peer inside of our own depths than to look at examples that are outside of our bodies.
Hmm.
And so that's why I think it's absolutely necessary. And that's how I think people would be impacted by this production.
And that's a great way to end this. Jeffrey L. Page, director and choreographer of Choir Boy. This is the Philadelphia Theatre Company production. It is on stage now. If you are listening to this, go get tickets. The website is Philadelphia Theater, and that's theatrecompany.org. And get more than one, because theater is more fun with a plus one. I always say that. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for taking the time to unpack and weave around this story with me. This was truly a pleasure getting to know more about you and your style and talking about process and how you approached this piece. It was truly a pleasure. I have my tickets, and I can't wait to experience this live in the theater at
That makes me
Philadelphia Theater
happy,
Company.
and I can't wait to hear what you think about it.
Yes, definitely. So again, thank you very much for chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Want to get involved with Broad Street Review? Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Get Involved at the top. While you're there, help keep us running and click Donate to find out how. Connect with us on social media, on Facebook and Twitter at BroadST Review. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.